Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Well, it is really exciting to be here. I have been in New Zealand only once before, and that was 5 years ago. I have never been here. So you live in a gorgeous part of the world, I think. Okay. I'm going to explain. Do you hear me okay? It's okay? So whatever. Okay, I'm going to just pass around this sign-up sheet. We put out, I'll tell you more about what we do in a minute. Oh, you want to take that? Thank you. We put out regular information by email and by post about Israel, from Israel directly, so I hope that you will put your details down so that we can be in touch. My name is Sondra Baras, and I'm an Orthodox Jew. I'm not a Christian. I live in Israel. I was born in the United States, as you can probably tell from my accent. I like your accents, though. Sounds good. Anyway, and grew up in an Orthodox Jewish family, which means that from a very young age, from as far back as I can remember, the Word of God was central to our upbringing. We read the Bible. Before we could read, we were read to from the Bible. Actually, the language that we read and study the Bible in is Hebrew. I have my Bible with me. The Hebrew Bible, by the way, I don't know if you're familiar, the Hebrew Bible is what you may call the Old Testament, and it's all in Hebrew. How many of you read Hebrew? Understand Hebrew? Good. Well, my new Israeli friend here. Okay, but so we learned this, and we were really immersed in the Bible and the reality of the Bible from a very young age. And that means that when we think about Israel, or we learn about Israel, we heard about Israel, first and foremost, our relationship with Israel came from the Bible. Living in Cleveland, Ohio, Israel as a modern reality was not that familiar to me, although my parents told me about, the wonderful state of Israel and how miraculous it was that had been established in 1948, but I didn't live there and had never seen it. When I was just 9 years old, the Six-Day War broke out. Now, you probably have a vague or even an expert understanding of the history of Israel, but just to bring you, up to date, the state of Israel was established in 1948. And immediately, without even giving Israel a moment to breathe, Israel was invaded by 5 Arab armies determined to destroy the state of Israel before it even had a chance to come into being. They failed, and the state of Israel was actually established, which was, in my opinion, one of the greatest miracles of all time. I think probably the greatest miracle of all time. You know why I think it was the greatest miracle of all time? Because if you think about it for a moment, when we think of like brilliant miracles, maybe you'll think of the parting of the Red Sea. Huge numbers of people, 600,000 men, by the way, that doesn't include the women and the children, come up to the Dead Sea. They're being chased from behind by the Egyptians. And it's not just that they win a war, but they do absolutely nothing. And the sea turns into dry land. They walk through, then they get to the other side. The sea covers over the Egyptians. That's an amazing miracle. Changing the course of nature just at the right moment, saving the people of Israel. I think the establishment of the state of Israel is a bigger miracle. Now you're going to think, why? Where? But think about it for a minute. Is there another nation on this earth that was exiled from their land, and not to one place? It's not like the people of Israel were transported and they were put in New Zealand, although how we would have gotten to New Zealand, then that would be another question. No, Jews end up being dispersed all over the world and yet remain a nation. Retain their faith, retain their book, retain their language, and retain their hope and their expectation that God will bring them back to their land. There would have been no modern Zionism without an ancient belief that one day God would bring us back to the land. So that means the miracle of the state of Israel is not just the miracle of the fact that in the 20th century Jews start coming in greater numbers to Israel and the circumstances allow this. It's not just the fact that the United Nations votes to recognize Israel. It's not just that Israel, although vastly outnumbered, manages to survive its own independence war and become a state. It's that there's a nation left to come back. That the nation of Israel is intact. That means for 2,000 years, every single day, God is making a miracle happen. That's why I think it's the greatest miracle of all time. But anyway, go back to our story. So the state of Israel is established in 1948, and it comes into existence, but as a result of the war, Israel finds itself in vastly reduced borders compared to biblical Israel. Now, I've given everybody these brochures. In it is a map. And if you open that, it'll give you a much easier understanding of what it is we're talking about. This is a map of the center of Israel. Here's Jerusalem, right here, somewhat in the middle, a little bit further south than north. Jerusalem. The Galilee is off the map, begins at the top of the map and goes off the map in the north, and Negev is off the map in the south. This is the Mediterranean Sea. The Jordan River is here along Israel's eastern border. But I'm focusing here on the center of the country because this is where our story is. If you look in the center of the country, you see this vast area of land surrounded by green line, okay, over here. This area here is the area that you will see referred to in your newspapers and on your television as the West Bank. That's this, okay? Now, by the way, just to give you a sense of distances, now New Zealand is considered a very small country. You are many times the size of Israel, just to make you feel big, you know? Compared to Israel, you're Texas, all right? Anyway, Texas is big. Have any of you been in Texas? Texas is big. Okay, anyway, just to give you a sense of distances, if you look at this green line over here, which essentially was Israel's unofficial border, it was a ceasefire line, but the unofficial border of Israel from 1949 to 1967, from here to the sea, 15 kilometers. That's it. 15 kilometers over here. And here is Israel's coastal plain, where 70% of Israel's population resides. This area that is referred to as the West Bank is a little bit bigger. It's probably about 50, 60 kilometers across. Israel's a very small country, no matter how you cut it. This is also a mountain range. Now, Jordan occupied this area from 1949 to 67. Why? Because that's where the Jordanian army got to. It came from here, invaded, was stopped at this line, ceasefire, no borders. Why was there no border? Because none of the Arab nations at that point in time were willing to recognize Israel and sign a treaty with Israel with recognized borders. Jordan's occupation of this area was illegal under international law. There were only 2 countries in the whole world that recognized Jordan's claim to this area. That was Great Britain and Pakistan. No other countries, okay? Now, but in any case, this would have remained the situation. Israel was not at all interested in changing the so-called status quo at that time. Israel at that point was trying to become a state. It absorbed within a very few years 4 times its population. There were only 500,000 Jews living in Israel in 1948, and the reason that number was so low was because throughout the 20 years prior, the British refused to let Jews come into the land, except in very small numbers. We think about how many of the 6 million Jews could have been saved had Britain allowed these Jews to come into what was then Palestine, but they didn't. But that's a different story. In 1967, Jordan attacked Israel from this area. And in response to that attack, Israel pushed the Jordanians east of the Jordan River, where they are to this day. And it is since then that Israel came into possession of this area, the West Bank. But it's the West Bank because that's what Jordan called it. Jordan, by the way, has renounced all claim to this area. The real way to refer to this, the real name of this area, is Judea and Samaria. Now, I'm sure I'm sitting in a church. That usually means that the people I'm talking to know a bit about the Bible. Is that true? Good. Otherwise, right, I like the pastor says hopefully. That's right. Otherwise, there's something wrong here. Okay, assuming you all have a sound biblical knowledge, you understand what Judea and Samaria is. Now, I'll tell you something a little bit ironic when you think about it. All over the world today, people are talking about this is an illegally occupied area by Israel. They'll call it illegally occupied Palestine. So first of all, a couple clarifications. There was never a state of Palestine. Palestine itself refers to a region, and it was the region that includes all of Israel today and all of Jordan today, because that was the mandate for Palestine that was given to Great Britain after World War I. There was never a Palestinian people. That's an invention of the 1960s. And in fact, the only reason they identified themselves as Palestinian as opposed to Arab was in order to create a national identity that could lay claim to the land that Israel had or wanted. Because if they came to the United Nations or if they came to the international community and they said, we want another state, they would say, who are you? And they would say, we're Arabs. And they'd say, but you've got 21 Arab states. Why do you need another one? They had to create a different, within the Arab whatever nation, they had to create a different ethnic identity, otherwise no one would even listen to them. And that is how the whole idea of a Palestinian people was created. Now I'll tell you something else. When Jordan, the Palestinian Liberation Organization, the PLO, was established in 1964, and that was the first time that this idea of Palestinian nationhood came together in an official way, an official organization, an official document called the Palestinian Covenant. Now that covenant calls for the destruction of Israel and it calls for armed struggle in order to destroy Israel, etc. All these wonderful, wonderful things. But I did a little exercise a few years ago and discovered something amazing. I Googled, Professor Google, by the way, a brilliant, brilliant man, woman, whatever. Professor Google tells us the following. If you Google Palestine National Covenant 1964, you will find a document that says specifically that the Palestinians have no claim to this land. The same place where you see on television these Palestinian people saying, oh, this is our homeland forever and ever and ever, and our ancestors were here. They specifically relinquished all claim to this land then. Why? Because Jordan had it. And throughout those 19 years that Jordan occupied this area, the Palestinians never asked for a Palestinian state from Jordan. They only wanted a Palestinian state from Israel. Why? To replace Israel. And indeed in 1968, just a few months after Israel miraculously won this war and came into possession of Judea and Samaria, the Palestinians amended their covenant to take out those clauses that say we relinquish our claim. It was only in 1968 that the Palestinians exercised the claim for the first time against this land. So much for ancient rights. Okay. But I want to talk about our ancient rights. Because the truth of the matter is, in order to understand our claim to Judea and Samaria, in fact, in order to understand the Jewish claim to any part of the land of Israel, you have to go back to the Bible. And that's pretty ancient. That goes back before any ancient rights that any Palestinians can claim. Genesis 12. And the Lord spoke to Abram, saying, go forth from your country, from your birthplace, from the house of your father to the land that I will show you. And I will make of you a great nation, and I will bless you, and I will raise up your name, and you will be for a blessing. And I will bless those who bless you, I will curse those who curse you, and through you will be blessed all the families of the earth. Sounds wonderful. Verse 6. And Abram passed through the land to the place of Shechem, to the oak of Moreh. And the Canaanites were then in the land. And he built, and Abram built, and the Lord appeared to Abram, saying, I will give this land to your children. And he built there an altar to the Lord who had appeared to him. Now if we go back to that map, and if you look at the northern part of the map, you will see the city of Shechem. This is a city that's referred to by the Arabs as Nablus. It is biblical Shechem. And look just to the east of that, you'll see a modern Jewish community called Elon Moreh. Elon Moreh is the original word in the Bible for the Oak of Moreh. And it is there at that point that Abraham comes. It's his first stop in the land of Israel. And while he is standing there looking around, have any of you ever been there to Elon Moreh? To Elon Moreh, to Mount Gerizim, to Mount Ebal, to any of those places there? When you're standing up on those mountains, you indeed have an amazing view of almost the entire land of Israel. And while Abraham is standing there, God promises the land to his children. And Abraham understands that this is a promise that God will keep and will be faithful to forever. Because Abraham at that time is probably the only man on earth who understands who God, the creator of the universe, really is. And Abraham walks in that faith and continues to travel through the land. Now, if you remember, God promises to Abraham that it will be 400 years before that promise will actually be realized, because in the meantime, the children of Israel have to go down to Egypt, they have to be enslaved, and then God will rescue them. And he rescues them, and at the end of Deuteronomy, as part of Moses' last words to the nation, he conveys a very special commandment to the children of Israel. Deuteronomy 11, verse 26. Behold, I place before you today a blessing and a curse. A blessing, if you listen to the commandments of the Lord your God, which I command you today. And a curse, if you do not listen to the commandments of the Lord your God, and you stray from the path which I have commanded you today, to go after strange gods which you did not know. Now, what is the blessing and the curse? This is actually a covenant. The blessing and curse is a classic way of setting forth a covenant, because a covenant, think in terms of contract. God enters into a contract with the nation of Israel that basically says, if you obey me, I will bless you. And if you do not obey me, I will curse you. And that is a pattern that's set forth in the actual text of that covenant, is towards the end of Deuteronomy. But here, God tells us what they're going to need to do, and this actually is implemented in Joshua chapter 8. The scripture continues, and when the Lord your God brings you to the land that you go there to inherit, you will place the blessing on Mount Gerizim and the curse on Mount Ebal. The next verse then tells us exactly where those two mountains are. Keep in mind that the children of Israel, they're in the desert. They haven't been in the land of Israel for generations. They have no clue as to where Mount Gerizim and Mount Ebal are. They are on the other side of the Jordan, in the direction of the setting sun, in other words, west of the Jordan, in the land of the Canaanite, which sits in the Arava, opposite the Gilgal, next to the oaks of Moreh. Only other time in the Bible that this place, Oak of Moreh, is mentioned. It's not a coincidence. God brings the nation of Israel to stand and to enter into a covenant with God in between these two mountains, between Mount Ebal and Mount Gerizim. Just next to the neighboring mountain over is Oak of Moreh, Elon Moreh. Why? What's so special about that place? And it took me a while to figure this out. I stood there on the mountains. There's a mountain just opposite the Three Seas outlook where you can see the mountains right in front of you. You see Oak of Moreh, Mount Ebal, Mount Gerizim, and the Shechem, even today, Shechem or Shechem is just below. On the other side, by the way, you can see from this outlook, you can see all the way to the Jordan. You can see Jordan. You can see the Jordan Valley, which is the plains of Moab. You see exactly where the children of Israel are camped when they hear this instruction from Moses, and you can see how they would have walked to these mountains to enter into the covenant. But I suddenly occurred to me, penny dropped. Here's the children of Israel coming out of Egypt. It would have been so easy for them, especially the second generation, to assume God took them out of Egypt because he had mercy on them. They were slaves, and God is a merciful God. So look down on these people that are downtrodden and persecuted, and rescue them and bring them to the land. But God wanted to be very clear to the nation of Israel, this is not about mercy. This is about promise. This is about destiny. And therefore he brings them to enter into that covenant with God, to the very same place where this promise first began. to the very place where God first promised the land to Abraham. And he's telling the people of Israel, I selected you when I selected Abraham, and I am fulfilling my promise to Abraham. I am a God who keeps his promise. Now, this promise continues. If we look at Deuteronomy 30, by the way, a very, very important chapter, the ideas that I'm bringing forth today, of course, if we had about 4 or 5 hours, don't worry, I'm not going to do this to you. But if we did, we would go through lots more scripture. I'm just giving you some highlights, but scriptures that I believe are critical in understanding Israel today. In Deuteronomy 30 begins after the blessings and the curses. What does that mean? God is referring to a time when they've entered the land of Israel, all is well, they obeyed God's word, they had their blessing. But then they sinned. Well, God knows human nature. He knows we're going to sin, okay? He knows we've sinned, and the curses have already come, which means what? You've read the curses already. I'm not going to do that today. But when you're reading Deuteronomy 30, and you did it in order, you've already read Deuteronomy 27 and 28. There's the curse. What is the curse? The land will be destroyed. The people will be exiled. God comes and says, after that happens, I'm going to return you to the land. And he says as follows, verse 4, if you will be dispersed to the ends of the earth, from there the Lord your God will gather you, and from there he will take you, and the Lord your God will bring you to the land that your fathers inherited, and you will inherit it, and you will be benefited and multiplied more than your fathers. That's the end of the story. That's the pattern. God promises, if I send you, if I disperse you, if I punish you, that doesn't mean I've broken my covenant with you. Because the promise that God made to Abraham is eternal. That promise is to Abraham. That promise is then reinforced in the covenant with the nation of Israel. And God promises, whatever happens, even if I disperse you from the land, you're going to come back. I'm going to bring you back. I won't forget you. How ironic is it that today, the very place where this covenant was entered into, the very place where God first made that promise to Abraham, this is the place where the world says doesn't belong to Israel. If there's anything that flies in the face of this concept of God fulfilling his promise, God being true to his promise, it is this threat to Israel, pushing Israel to retreat from the very heart of biblical Israel. Judea and Samaria is the heart of biblical Israel for many reasons. One of the reasons is because the actual creation of the concept of biblical Israel happened there, with God appearing to Abraham and later that covenant at Mount Gerizim and Mount Ebal. But this area is also the area where most of the biblical events took place. Beginning with Abraham. Where did he go? He went south. He went to Bethel. He built an altar. He continued south. He went to Hebron. He bought the first piece of Jewish real estate in Hebron when he bought a cave in a field to bury his wife Sarah. Follow the prophets. Follow Joshua when he first enters the land. Where does he settle first? In Judea and Samaria. Follow the prophets. Where are they? If you look at Elijah, look at Elisha in English? Elisha, where is he? He's the prophet from Samaria. This is where we are. King David first rules from Hebron, 7 years. Then he conquers Jerusalem. These are all places that people would have you believe today don't belong in Israel, that we illegally occupy them. Now, the victory of the Six-Day War was a victory that I cannot overstate. It was an amazing victory. Step 2, I like to call it, in the miracle of the creation of the state of Israel. Because in just 6 days, Israel went from a situation of being tremendously threatened by all these same Arab armies again, on those strategic heights, with Israel this mere 15 kilometers wide. Imagine what this would have looked like. And yet, miraculously, in just 6 days, they were able to push the Jordanians east of the Jordan River and come into Judea and Samaria for the first time to control it. And please remember that the whole time Jordan was in control of Judea and Samaria, Jews were not allowed in. Not to visit, not to pray. We couldn't go to the old city of Jerusalem, which was also occupied by Jordan. We couldn't go to Hebron. We couldn't go to this very area, the Oak of Moreh, Shechem. We couldn't go there. And so people came in, and they came in and they visited and they prayed and they were ecstatic and they praised God. And even total atheists believed it was a miracle. I'm not sure if it lasted. Some of them lasted. Some of them lasted. And that's how the settlement movement was born. The settlement movement was born out of an understanding that this was a miracle. And a miracle is not just something you sit back and watch like you watch an amazing movie with all the effects. Okay? A miracle is God calling you to respond to responsibility. God opened the doors and had us come in a miraculous fashion. But it's for us to settle the land. God tells us in Ezekiel 36 that the mountains of Israel will come to life again, that the cities will be rebuilt. How is that going to happen? God has never and will never bring cities down from the heavens. He opens the door through miracle, but it is for us to walk through that door and build the cities. God says to Joshua when he first enters the land, every place you place your foot, I will give that land to you. But we have to place our foot. God didn't give us Judea and Samaria so that we could watch it. God didn't even give us Judea and Samaria so we could put army bases on certain hills so that we could protect Tel Aviv. That's also important, believe me, very important. But God gave us Judea and Samaria so that we could settle it and possess it and make it our own. And that's what the settlement movement is all about. Just want to conclude with a little personal story back to how I came into this whole thing. When I was 18 years old, I went from Cleveland, Ohio to Israel to spend a year studying Bible in Jerusalem. And this was a very special year in the history of the settlement movement. It was the year that the first community was established in Samaria. There had been a number of attempts in 1974 and 1975, and they had all failed because the government was very ambivalent. The government, on the one hand, wasn't ready to say Jews don't belong in biblical Israel, but on the other hand was too nervous to actually set up a community in biblical Israel because of international pressure and because of fear of what the Arabs might do if we actually exercised our rights to the land. But there was this small and determined group of people driven by faith, people driven by this very understanding that God placed this responsibility upon us. And they tried and tried again. And in December of 1975, the effort succeeded. Thousands of people from all over Israel came together on the mountains of Samaria, just east of Shechem, on that very area that we refer to as Elon Moreh, the Oak of Moreh. And the government saw that there was such vast grassroots support that they relented, and they said 30 families could settle in an army camp nearby. 2 weeks later, I went to that army camp with two of my friends. It was very difficult conditions. We ended up sleeping in a tent. It was January, which is not January in New Zealand, January in the Northern Hemisphere, cold, windy, don't like sleeping in tents, even when I was 18, but I managed. But it was an amazing experience because that was the first time I was able to come face to face with the people who were going to change not only Israel, but change the world. People who, they're blamed by the world today, but they've changed the world because they had this vision and they had a spiritual understanding and they realized that this is something ordinary people can do. We don't have to wait for presidents and prime ministers. Ordinary people of faith can make a difference, and they did. And they had the whole world listening. And the government approved. And in 1977, Menachem Begin became prime minister of Israel. He was a man of faith himself and a man of deep, deep passion for Israel and for the Bible. And he began an official government policy to settle Judea and Samaria. What began as a handful of people just after 1967, and another handful in 1975. Today, we are more than 400,000 Jews living in the heart of biblical Israel in Judea and Samaria. Isn't that amazing? So I am here today to bring you this message to help you understand where we're coming from. Try to do it in as brief a time as possible. Of course, there's so much more to be said and so much more to learn. And I hope that you will get on our mailing list, get the information that we're sending out. We have a lot of resources on our website. I also have some materials in the back that may be helpful to you. I hope that you will start will become an ongoing journey of study, teaching, conversation, partnership with us as we continue to settle and develop Israel. I represent actually a Christian organization, Christian Friends of Israeli Communities. It's actually a partnership. I like to say that we in Israel are the Israeli communities part of that equation, and all over the world we are unbelievably blessed, thank God, and I think this is another miracle, by the way, after all these centuries of hatred and persecution by Christians against Jews. Today, Christians are coming forward and say, I want to bless Israel. I want to help Israel. And the kind of prayers and words that I heard here in this congregation is just amazing to me. You know, to hear you talking about how you want to bless Israel and how you love Israel and how you see God's plan working out in Israel. We see God's plan working out in Israel every single moment of every single day. I have somebody who once said, when you're in Israel, God is just a local call away. And that's absolutely true. You feel it in a way that you cannot possibly feel it any other way, any other part of the world. And so what we're doing at CFOIC is enabling you to understand this, to partner with us, to join us. And I hope that you will decide to become partners and involved in the work we're doing in settling and developing the most important part of the land of Israel today. I just want to show you a short film that will give you further insight on the kind of work we're doing in the land of Israel, the people we are helping, the people like you are helping in Israel. Thank you very much.
I'll speak up loud.
Here, you can have it.
Oh, here we go. We're going to just show this little clip now, so let's watch that. And then after that, we're going to take up an offering for Sondra's work in Judea and Samaria. And if you're not prepared today for that, you'll see envelopes in that little handout that you'll find on your seat. There is an envelope there which you can put your donation in that, so it can be...
And they can fill out the credit card information too on the card.
And there's credit card information, it's all on there. So we'll see the clip, we'll have the offering, and during that time, would you be available just for maybe a few questions?
Sure, whatever.
Okay, so I'll ask you to come back up after that, and you hang on to that. Okay, let's watch the clip.
You know, as an American Christian, I read the scriptures and I see that Genesis 12:3 says that we as Christians are to bless God's chosen people. Genesis 12:3 says, I will bless those who bless my people, and I will curse those who curse my people. And I've always wanted to be a part of that blessing. But living in America, in the heartland of America, it's been so hard to try to figure out a way that we could be a part of what's going on in Israel. Until one day we came across Sondra Baras working with Christian Friends of Israeli Communities. In driving through Judea and Samaria with her, seeing the work that she's doing in the communities there, we learned that we too could be a part of what's going on there. We saw schools that didn't have playgrounds. We saw senior citizen centers that needed more help. We saw all kinds of things. We saw clinics that needed equipment, and we saw security fences that needed to be completed. I would like for you to come with me now and just walk through a few of these communities in Judea and Samaria and see the work of Christian Friends of Israeli Communities.
A major focus of CFOIC Heartland in recent years is a variety of special education programs throughout Judea and Samaria. These same pioneers who sought to follow God's word and settle the land are also uniquely sensitive to the needs of others, and especially of the weakest members of society. One example is Heart of Benjamin, located in the community of Ofra.
Levav was born with Down syndrome and integrated very well into the schools, into the community here. As she got older and the gap between her and her classmates grew, more and more there were demands on her that put her under more pressure than she needed. And then I heard about Lady Benjamin, the Heart of Benjamin. I took her there the next day, and 2 days a week ever since she's been going in the afternoons. A great community of kids. She's got friends there. She's free there. She enjoys it immensely. If she doesn't want to get out of bed in the morning, we say, "This is a Heart of Benjamin day." She jumps.
Heart of Benjamin is this amazing place for her. She feels comfortable there, she's relaxed, she gets amazing attention. She's a very social, active human being, and she really gets a lot of those needs met there. I think there's no place in the world like Heart of Benjamin for her.
CFOIC, which supports an organization like this, is really making it possible for something like this to happen.
CFOIC Heartland has also supported the Sadna program in Gvaot, a special needs school that is now at the center of a new village in Judea, a community with a special needs child at its heart. CFOIC Heartland has become a place where people with a variety of needs can turn and receive help, and especially when tragedy strikes.
I called Sondra and told her that we were in need for a family who were orphaned, 5 children moving in with the older sister. It was before the high holidays. Within 2 days, Sondra made sure that the money would arrive into Choa so that they would be able to buy everything that they needed for the holidays. I can't express how grateful we are for the amount of times that Christian Friends of Israeli Communities come through.
Security has always been a central need in Judea and Samaria. So many families were touched and hurt by terrorism. So many people are vulnerable and need protection.
12 years ago, my son Kobe Mandel and his friend Yosef Ishran, 2 8th graders, walked out to this canyon right here to explore the place where their friends had been playing in for 20 years. Sometime around 10 o'clock in the morning, they were trapped in a small cave by 4 or 5 Palestinian terrorists and beaten to death with boulders the size of bowling balls. When we found out, my wife fell to the ground and said, "How are we going to get through this?" And we said, "We're going to get through this because we have 3 other children." Even as we live the dream the Jews have been dreaming for 2,000 years, to live in the land of Israel, the land of our forefathers, we have to be constantly wary and conscious of the fact of the safety of our children. It's a constant battle to keep them safe in this land that God promised to us, the Jewish people.
CFOIC Heartland has been there for so many communities as they seek assistance in protecting their residents.
Here in Neve Tzuf, we have a very large problem with Arab arson on all different sides of our community. The equipment that CFOIC has purchased for us has made our firefighting capabilities much better and made our firefighters much safer.
In addition to firefighting needs, CFOIC Heartland has provided life-saving medical equipment for Neve Tzuf.
We have the automatic external defibrillator that was purchased. We have an oxygen balloon. We have an ambo bag. We have a cardio pump. We have suction. We hope never to have to use this equipment, but we know that here in the largest building that we have in our community, this equipment is ready for us to use at any time to save a life.
We're wedged between the eastern border of Israel with Jordan, and to the west, the Palestinian Authority. And we can't afford to take the issue of security lightly. Every one of our communities has a rapid response team, a group of young men who are all volunteers, who train in order to be able to be the first responders in any issue, in any case. One of the major threats we have from the Arab population is a thievery and robbery of our produce and of our animals. If they're able to come in to steal, we don't know what the next step will be, but we're afraid that it might be something much more severe. CFOIC is so much a part of enabling us to live here. We've gotten support, we've gotten help in equipment, and we've also had help in education and social needs within the communities, within the region. CFOIC for Heartland is such an important part in protecting the people in the communities of the Jordan Valley.
The Adumim block consists of three communities, Alon, Nofe Prat, and Kfar Adumim. We lived here for 20 years, and 15 years ago, after the murder of our friend Chagit Zavitsky, a year later, we established this pioneer community, and we lived there for 2 years all alone. And this CFOIC has been connected to us since then. They've been helping us for the past 20 years with all our special needs, if it's security, if it's emergency equipment, if it's youth programs, and even a petting zoo to help us work with our special needs children. We're very appreciative to the CFOIC for being there for us for all these years.
Now that you have seen what we do in Israel, I hope that you will take this opportunity to join us in the work and being a part of the fulfillment of prophecy. You can do this by making your contributions to Christian Friends of Israeli Communities. And in doing that, you will be a part of the blessing that God promised to us in Genesis 12:3. Those who bless my people, I will bless. Every penny that you give, every dollar that you give goes to help our friends in Judea and Samaria. And we really hope that you will join us today in this effort, because it's our heart, and I know it's your heart too. Come join us.
Awesome. Great presentation, really good way of seeing what's happening in Judea and Samaria. Can I ask the ushers, please? We're going to take up the offering for the work. So, yep, we've got more bags. So we're just going to pass that round. Just remind you once again that we have these envelopes and all the information's in that pack that you would have got on your seats. So let's have a few questions, shall we? We've got time for 2 or 3 questions. If you've got something you'd like to ask Sondra, just put your hand up and we'll put it. There we go. Thank you.
Sondra, the building for the Benjamin program, is it now finished?
It is, yes.
Oh, fantastic.
Yes, it's an amazing thing. It's not, there is still one wing that hasn't been completed. We're still working on that. But the main building is completed, and I have to say a special thank you to John Hagee Ministries. I don't know if you've heard of John Hagee. He's a very well-known pastor in the United States that donated significantly to that project. And we're very, very grateful. Without that Christian support, I don't think the building would be up today. Okay. And that service is, we saw a bit on the film, the handicapped children.
I just want to say that my youngest son is having cerebral palsy, the Handicap Society in New Zealand. And when I saw that program of the Benjamin program that supports the children and the family, I said, this is as it ought to be. It's so advanced. I was just so inspired. So I just something.
Well, thank you. I'm going to take that message back to the leaders and parents of Heart of Benjamin, and I'm sure it'll make them feel wonderful that you see it that way. Thank you.
Which one of these is Judea and which one is Syria?
Oh, I'm sorry. North of Jerusalem is Samaria, and Jerusalem and south is Judea.
Somebody mentioned, or it was mentioned in the film, that they saw schools that had no playgrounds. Can you give us any information about the status of the schools and the sorts of conditions that they are working under?
Well, things are very dynamic, but I have a folder that I put out for everyone to take a look at in the back, at the table in the back. I also have some resources back there that shows you all the various project needs that we are currently fulfilling. There was a brand new school that began in September. The first time there was a religious school in the central part of the Jordan Valley, which was very exciting because this means that more and more in Israel we have two streams of the public school system, the religious and the non-religious. And this Jordan Valley was an area that most of the people preferred a non-religious school system, although I must say non-religious doesn't mean atheist. It's just less Bible, less of that sort of stuff. But this was a brand new thing, which was very exciting, and it was just starting. In fact, the classrooms today are still in caravans. And we had a church in Texas, not John Hagee, a different church in Texas, that within 2 months raised the money we needed to put a playground in that school, and they came to visit in November, and there's a playground there. So that's just like one example of that kind of a need that someone saw, heard, fulfilled, and it's now up there. Many of the communities, they don't necessarily have playgrounds in the schools, but they have playgrounds in the neighborhood, in the community, which is also fabulous, and we're constantly working on that because most of our families have lots of kids, and we got to keep those kids busy and safe.
What's the average attitude of the average Israeli citizen towards the settlers?
Well, typically, over the years, it was really seen as a 50-50 split, with about roughly half the country thinking it was a great idea and half the country thinking it was a problematic idea. Mostly because there were a lot of people out there that were saying, I believe incorrectly, but they were saying that if we have any chance of peace with the Palestinians, we're going to have to give up some land and accept the idea of a Palestinian state living side by side with Israel. That attitude has completely changed in Israel today. The overwhelming majority of people in Israel today do not see the Palestinians as a potential partner for peace. The destruction of the communities in Gaza, we had 17 Jewish communities in Gaza. The destruction of those communities, the forced removal of close to 10,000 people from their homes to, other parts of Israel, that was seen as an experiment, okay? The entire Gaza Strip was handed to the Palestinian Authority. Let's see, can they take this as an opportunity to create a Palestinian entity, mini-state, whatever you want to call it, as a first step in seeing can we live in peace together on this kind of format. And instead what happened is the Hamas took over, and they have been firing missiles and rockets at us ever since. We've had several wars where we had to actually go in and try to clean up a little bit, get rid of the things that were threatening us. It's never really been decisive. And as a result of that, and as a result of ongoing terrorism, especially what we've been seeing in the past few months, there's more and more of a recognition in Israel that the Palestinians are not and have never been interested in peace. And therefore, giving up land like this, it's not only giving up your own heritage, which everybody recognizes. The question is, are you willing to give up your heritage if it will bring you something valuable in return? But today, people say, what for? All we'll be doing is giving up our heritage, giving up our strategic depth, and getting more terrorism in return. So today, the balance has shifted away from this kind of support that there once was, at least in part of the country.
Judy?
Sondra, are there any messianic fellowships
in Samaria?
I have no idea. I don't think so, but I wouldn't know. No, I'm not Messianic. I'm an Orthodox Jew. I don't really have anything to do with Messianic, so I wouldn't know. But Jews in Israel are Jewish, for the most part, which is what we want to be.
That's it. Well, we've got something very exciting now.